Hello, all. I welcome my viewers and students to my YouTube channel, Political Science. And today I'll be discussing on Shri Madhav's article on his spiritual home, published in the Indian Express, edition 5th July 2025. So let us begin with this discussion. Before starting this discussion, I would like to inform you that I have been uploading various articles published in Indian Express of various scholars and ministers who have been talking about very contemporary topics. So stay tuned, and I've already made a playlist on current affairs, students who are preparing for civil services. Now, let us start with this topic, his spiritual home. Shri Madhav has discussed the topic and he has elaborated a lot on this. So I am trying to make it more concise and brief so that the students can keep tuned with that. So the Dalai Lama's journey of exile, faith and legacy. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, now turning 90, has spent 66 years in exile in India after being granted asylum in 1959. Revered for his spiritual leadership and deep bond with India, he has upheld peace and dignity while advocating for Tibetan autonomy. As succession questions arise, tensions persist with China over who will recognize his spiritual heir. Now, if we look into the journey from Lhasa to Dharamshala, the spiritual odyssey of the Dalai Lama, what we find in the various facets is a life in exile. His Holiness the Dalai Lama turns 90 this week. He entered India at the age of 23 in 1959. He has spent his last 66 years in Dharamshala, Himachal Pradesh. The Central Tibetan Administration CIA was established shortly after his arrival to oversee Tibetan exile affairs. From March 3L 1959, a historical arrival, the Dalai Lama's party reached Kanzamani near Tawang, then NEFA, now Arunachal Pradesh. He was seriously ill and physically exhausted after a 2-week journey from Lhasa. Accompanied by 80 followers, he was received by Indian Army officials at the border. Now, India's welcome. Now, P.N. Menon, a diplomat familiar with Lhasa, welcomed him with a message from Prime Minister Nehru. This marked the beginning of India's long standing humanitarian and spiritual relationship with the Tibetan leader. Now, India's moral crossroads, that is Nehru, the Dalai Lama, and the Tibetan question. In the year 1956, a cautious welcome, one could notice the Dalai Lama visited India for the first time to attend the 2500th Buddha Jayanti celebrations in Bodh Gaya. Prime Minister Nehru, wary of diplomatic tensions with China and influenced by Zhou Enlai, advised the Dalai Lama to return to Tibet and resolve matters with the Chinese leadership. India made it clear it could not support him politically at that time. Now, in the year 1959, one can see a shift in stance. After the uprising in Tibet, the Dalai Lama fled to India and arrived at the border on March 31st, 1959. P.N. Menon, an Indian diplomat, welcomed him with a message from Nehru. My colleagues and I welcome you. India would be happy to afford the necessary facilities. Nehru emphasized that the gesture was humanitarian, not political, and that the people of India held the Dalai Lama in deep veneration. Now, a turning point one can see. This marked a significant shift in India's approach from cautious diplomacy to offering asylum and moral support. It laid the foundation for the long standing relationship between India and the Tibetan exile community. Now, Tibetan refugees in India, if we find there have been settlement and legacy. Now, 1959, a historical asylum, as I talked about. Then, major Tibetan settlements in India as Dharamshala, Dehradun, Darjeeling, Kalimpong, Mainpat, Bailakupi, and Mundgod. Now, demographic trends. Now, Tibetan refugee population once exceeded 1 lakh. Many youth later migrated to the US, Europe, and other countries. As per CIA's 2022 census, approximately 66,000 Tibetans currently reside in India. So one can see the legacy of peaceful coexistence. Tibetan communities have integrated respectively, preserving their culture while contributing to Indian society. Now, the Dalai Lama's life in exile, if one look into it, then what Shri Madhav has talked about in his article, the dignified exile, the Dalai Lama and his followers honored their commitment to India by living peacefully and avoiding any anti national activity during their stay from Indian soil. Now, global reverence. As a revered Mahayana Buddhist guru, he gained international recognition and attracted followers from around the world. India's esteem, successive Indian governments, and the public have consistently held him in high regard as a spiritual and moral leader. Now one can see the emotional connection that over decades in exile, the Dalai Lama developed a deep and affectionate bond with India and its people. Now, my blood is Indian. He once said, I may be a Tibetan, but my blood is Indian. I ate the rice and dal of this country for 60 years. Now, cultural wisdom one can also see recalling a meeting with Prime Minister Morarji Desai. At that time, he remarked, You are the tree and we are a branch, highlighting Buddhism's roots in Indian spiritual tradition. Now, the Dalai Lamas one can also found the spiritual bond with Bharat. Now, enduring humility, the Dalai Lama's life in exile has been marked by deep reverence for Indian culture and spirituality. From voice for the voiceless, I describe myself as a son of India. My mind has been nourished by India's rich philosophical tradition, while my body has been fed by Indian rice and dal. Now, messenger of India's gifts, he identifies himself as a global ambassador of two profound Indian contributions, that is religious pluralism and ahimsa, non-violence. Now one can see in his whole thought the very idea of spiritual integration which is blooming. His teachings reflect a synthesis of Tibetan Buddhism and Indian philosophical thought rooted in gratitude and shared values. Now, if we dialogue without independence, the Dalai Lama China engagement. Now, initiation of talks which took place in 1979. Dialogue began when Deng Xiaoping invited the Dalai Lama's brother Gyalo Dongpu for a meeting in Beijing. Now, Deng's message, except for independence, everything can be discussed. Now, years of negotiations, multiple rounds of talks followed, though progress remained limited due to deep-rooted mistrust. Now, Strasbourg Proposal 1988. In a speech to the European Parliament, the Dalai Lama expressed willingness to remain within the People's Republic of China if genuine autonomy could be guaranteed. Now, what is the current position today? Tibetan exiles continue to support the call for autonomy, not independence, though formal engagement has stalled. Now, what one can learn from these stories, from these narratives, from the understanding what is the future of Tibetan leadership, succession, and sovereignty. India's position is very strong because India maintains that the Tibetan political issue is a bilateral matter to be resolved between the Dalai Lama and the Chinese leadership. Now, as far as the succession concerns are there, as the Dalai Lama advances in age, global attention has turned to the question of his succession. Now, 2011 declaration in September 2011, the heads of Tibetan Buddhist traditions affirmed that the institution of the Dalai Lama would continue. Now, Gaden Phunrong Trust's role. The Dalai Lama stated that the Gaden Phunrong Trust, his official office, will have exclusive authority to recognize his successor. Now, Chinese rejection. The China's government rejected this declaration, asserting that the succession process must occur under its supervision. So I hope this whole legacy, the idea of Buddhism, the idea of Tibetan leadership, and how it should be carried forward needs to be understood by the students. So stay tuned for this article. Have a nice day. I'll be also sharing the link of the Indian Express of this article of Shri Madhav ji in my description box. So please like, share, and subscribe this channel. Thank you.